Dr. Mrs. Brooks. Monica Brooks is her daughter. Monica is over at Library Services here at Marshall, Vice President. And so I'm thankful to have you all here. I'm really excited for this morning. So let me please introduce our reenactor, Mary Jo Martha. She's been doing this for 30 years. She has experience in Civil War and French and Indian War living histories. And she has done programs in most of the schools in the area and through the tri-state, and she loves history and she loves sharing the story of our ancestors. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mary Ingalls Draper. No, Mary Draper Ingalls, I'm sorry.
Good morning. Good morning. It's so nice to see you all. I understand you want to hear about my adventure. Well, that was many years ago, but I remember it so well. It was the summer of 1755. And I was outside. My mom had my boys, Tommy and Georgie. They were picking berries. Mom had to keep an eye on because we wanted at least some of the berries to go in the bucket. And because we had heard of some Indian raids on neighboring villages. My sister-in-law, Betty, she was hanging clothes on the line. Her wee babe was asleep in the shade of a tree because it was so hot. Will, my husband Will, and my brother Donnie were out in the fields hoeing and tending the garden. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we got hit hard. We got hit fast by this band of Indians. They came out of nowhere. I screamed for Ma to save the boys, and by the time they had already scalped. They had my boys. And I screamed for Betty, save your baby. And when I looked, they already killed the baby in the most gruesome manner. And Betty's arm was broken where she'd been trying to fight him off. Next thing I know, they threw a bag at my feet. What rolled out was Colonel Patton's head. I'm sorry, it's so gruesome, but it's the truth. And that's why it's still with me after all these years. They had Henry Leonard, my neighbor, as well. And he wasn't harmed, but he was terrified. Well, they stole anything they could carry off. They stole all of our pots and pans because most of them was cast iron. They took me and Betty and my boys. Tommy was 2, or Tommy was 4 and Georgie was 2. They took us and they started west, and they traveled hard and they traveled fast. And I tried with Betty, and I was on the same horse with the boys between us. And I'd reach over and try to break a twig every so often. Or I'd pull a piece of thread from my clothing and try to get it on the limbs, so that I was trying to leave a trail, because I knew that George and that Will and Johnny was coming to find us. Surely to goodness. They'd seen what happened, but they had no weapons, so they couldn't do anything. I had to be careful because they had some of the engines was behind us as well, following to make sure we didn't try to get away. We traveled hard and we traveled fast. And eventually when they did stop, they put us to work making salt, and the very kettles they had stolen from us. Now, if y'all ain't never made salt, it's a hot, dirty job. And this was July and August. But we kept traveling and kept traveling, and eventually we come to this river. I think you all call it, what is it? The Ohio, is that it? It's this very big river. I couldn't swim, Betty couldn't swim. I know my boys couldn't swim. I don't know about Henry Leonard, but I got the impression from his reaction, he couldn't swim either. And that engines got me from both sides, both arms, and practically swum upright across that river. How in the world they did that, I don't know. I was terrified I was going to drown. I was terrified for my boys and for Betty. It was just so horrible. And we traveled farther west. And all I kept thinking was how much farther away they were taking me from my home and my family. We finally got to their Shawnee town. They made us run the gauntlet. I don't know if y'all know what that is. That's where they line up on both sides and they beat you with anything they can find. Sticks, the handle of guns, they can hit you with their hands. They went easier on Betty because her arm was so broken, so messed up. It never healed right because, you know, it wasn't, she didn't have anyone to care for it. Once near Shawneetown, they put me to work making shirts. So I made my fancy shirts. Word got out. Here comes Chief Wildcat, the head of the Shawnee. And he was impressed because I was making these shirts and I was able to trade them for blankets and food because we knew winter was coming and we didn't know how long it was going to be here. Well, he was so impressed that he wanted me to be his wife. I said, I can't marry you. Well, Ingalls is my husband. I only marry one man. That made him mad that I turned down the offer of a chief to be his wife. So he traded me to these old fur traders. They were French. Smell. Hey, they weren't the cleanest of sorts. And they took me, but left Betty and the boys with Shawnee, and they took me even farther west. They had this old Deutsch woman with them. We couldn't communicate. And finally we figured out that I taught her that my name, Mary Ingalls. And she taught me her name was Gretel. That's all we knew about each other. And we got as far as the Big Bone Lips, way down. And they put us to work once again, making salt. If I never make salt again, it'll be too soon. Terrible, terrible job. But we get down there. The Frenchmen like their spirits, shall we say? So they would send me and Gretel out to find food. Well, it was getting late in the year. The only thing we could find was nuts and some berries and maybe some roots. Well, the ground got harder and harder. We had to travel farther away from where they were. So one day I convinced them that we needed the tomahawk to dig up roots. Well, that morning they were already having their spirits first thing in the morning. This is the day I'm gonna make my escape. I'm going home. Now, Gretel wasn't real thrilled, but I kept pointing and telling her, we're gone. This is it, we're going. I'm going home to my Will Ingalls or I'm gonna die trying. I ain't gonna just sit here. We start, and it's cold because by this point it's October. And our shoes had fallen apart. I don't know how long she had been in captivity before I was taken. Our clothes was tattered. What little bit there was of them. But we started. Now, just remember, there's no lights other than the moon. We couldn't build a fire because that might alert other tribes or the Frenchmen as to where we were. I just knew that river would eventually get me back home, even though I couldn't swim. So we start and we walk. And we walk for days, eating dried up berries, some nuts, maybe some roots. And we just keep traveling. Now, the small creeks was no problem. We could get across those. But the wider ones, we had to walk till we found a place we could cross and then walk back up, which put us many miles out of our way and took that much longer. One day, we heard a noise. I'm gonna tell you, we were scared because we didn't know what it was. It could have been an animal, it could have been another engine. So we hide for a little while and then we discover it's a horse. And it's in a cornfield. Oh my gosh. Food and transportation. So we eat some of the corn, and I will tell you, it was already dried and it was hard, but it was food. We got on the horse. Sometimes we rode together, sometimes, which made it easier crossing these streams. Sometimes We took turns, one would walk, and the other one would ride. The horse had a bell on it. Y'all know the big bells like you put on cows and you find. Gretel was fascinated by this bell. She's going to alert people to our thing. So I took a strip of fabric that was left for my clothing and wrapped it around it so it would be quiet so she could keep her bell. All things, you know, but hey, we kept traveling, and finally we got to a place where the horse couldn't go. There was a ravine, and the horse couldn't get across it. So we had to leave the horse and found a log that was laying across the ravine, and we walked across that log and looking down at you know, rocks below. We kept traveling. Well, Gretel got so hungry and so tired, and she had the tomahawk that day. We took turns. She threatened to kill me and eat me. I couldn't get away from her. Even though I'll be by myself, I gotta get away from her. I can't risk her doing what she says she, you know, because she's indicating, you know, she's gonna do that. She finally went to bed at night, and I'm gonna tell you, at night it was pitch black other than the moon. There was no other light. The sounds of animals, the sounds of the trees rustling in the leaves when the wind would blow. And I worked my way down the bank of the river. I can't swim, remember that. I'm terrified of water. Had to do something. So here's this, I felt around and I found a log. And I worked it loose and put it in the river. And I put my arms around that river. And I floated down the river, not knowing where I was going until I could get across to the other side. And I laid down and I was so cold. It was a cold night. And that water I was soaked through, but I'd gotten away from it. Sorry, it brings back all those fears. Think about that. The next morning, I hear, Mary Ingalls, where are you? Appreciate it. And I finally realized she's still across the river from me with her tomahawk. Okay. So I continue on and she continues on, and we both parallel one another on opposite sides of the Woods River. I think you call it the New River now. Is that what you all call it? But it was the Woods River then. So we keep going. There were places, and that I literally was holding on to vines and trees to pull myself up the sides of the hill because I was so very tired. I was hungry. And I just kept going, and every so often I hear, very golden, Gretel, I'm hungry. Keep going, you know. So we yell at one another. At the time, it was very quiet, so there's nobody, you know, no noise to interrupt us. So but at the same time, we don't want to yell because we don't want the Indians finding us or the animals alerted to us or anything like that. And finally, I collapsed. I just remember being in a field. I was cold. I was hungry. My hair had turned completely white. I was 20-some years old, 22, 23 years old. My hair was completely white. I had no clothes. And I collapsed in a field. 3 days later, I come to and I was in a cabin, in a bed. The cabin was a hunting cabin owned by Adam Harmon. who was also a resident of Radford or Draper's Meadow, Virginia, where I lived. Him and his boys have been out hunting. And I collapsed in his field. And he found me. And he had one of the boys went out and killed a bear and then made bear broth. And they fed that to me for 3 days before I come to. Once I came to, I told him about Gretel because I didn't want her still roaming the woods. I can't imagine what she thought was going on. I didn't answer for 3 days. And they went and found her and got her back to the cabin and was able to get her some nourishment in her and build her up as well. We eventually returned to Draper's Meadow. Glad to be home. So very glad, but at the same time, in my heart, I'm like, where's my boys? Have you not rescued them? Why haven't you rescued them? No. Where's Betty? So I don't know what's happened to them. I just know what's happening to me. After 6 years, Betty was ransomed from a kindly old Shawnee woman that had adopted her. So she was reunited with her family. I found out that my youngest, Georgie, died that first year in captivity at 2 years old. And after 14 years, Tommy was ransomed after numerous trials. And he came back home. Now, he occasionally would go visit his Indian family, and they had raised him and they'd been good to him. But he was home. Will and I had 3 more children, John, Rhoda, and Mary, and Susan. During the Battle of Point Pleasant, Will, Tommy, and Johnny participated in the battle. And Colonel Washington, y'all have heard of Colonel Washington? Okay. Well, he came up to Will and he's like, I read into Chief Wildcat. He said he heard that the woman Mary had escaped. Did she make it home? That's what he was concerned. He was so impressed with me and my fortitude that even after me escaping and being gone, he wanted to know if I'd survived. Will operated an ordinary, so we had a good life. And unfortunately, he died young. He was in his 50s, 58. And I had my Tommy back, and I had my other 3 children. And so that was my adventure. And I thank you. And if y'all would like to ask some questions, I will gladly answer. The story that I tell is based on the book Escape from Indian Captivity. It is written by Roberta Ingalls Steele, one of Mary Ingalls' descendants. These are the words that she told to her son, John. John had learned to read and write. John did not know punctuation. It is one long run-on sentence. That is the hardest thing to read I have ever encountered, because I didn't realize how much we depend on punctuation. So, but I got that book from one of the descendants, and I checked online. It is selling used for $58 plus shipping and handling. New, it is $181, and it is about this big and maybe a ½ inch thick. But that is the book that Jim Tom based Follow the River on. Now, I get a lot of questions on the fact that in the book, Jim puts in that she was pregnant and there was a daughter. According to Jim, he did that for dramatic effect. I looked at him and I said, Jim, don't you think this woman's life had enough drama in it? You didn't believe that? Because I had a coworker that read the book And after reading it, she hated Mary Ingalls because she didn't go back to the daughter. I said, it's historical fiction. And I love Jim and Darkring. But that part was added for drama, and I just don't see the need. What she went through. Now, one night she slept in a hollowed out log covered in leaves because she was so cold. And I can't imagine crawling into a log in the dark. Oh, no. I'm a chicken. I don't like bugs. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
That's, I just find it incredible that, that she could do all that in the winter with no source of heat, so no fire, or nothing. I don't understand how she literally could survive, how a human body could survive
I don't understand.
those temperatures.
I don't
Night
know.
after night, day after day, night after night.
To me, I have no clue. I know when she was found, she was basically a skeleton because she lost so much weight. I know people's lifestyle then, they were much more active than most people today because she was gardening and working on the farm. So she had more stamina. But I'm like you, the fact that she traveled 42 days and wasn't eating well before that, you know, it's just amazing.
Remind us of where Mary came from.
This is Blacksburg. That's Radford. She comes from Draper's Meadow, which is now Radford, Virginia. Let me get this straight.
But their settlement there was she, I'm trying to remember.
That's the settlement. Her family moved from Pennsylvania down to Draper's Meadow, which is now Radford. And you can see the blue line is the route she took going. And you're all welcome to come up and look at this. The red line shows where she's had to go back and forth to try to get across rivers and creeks.
Mm-hmm.
That is the line that she took coming back, and that's a little over 800 miles. I can't fathom that. Because I stopped it and it's kind of like, my doctor was telling me I should try walking to work. I live in Guyana and I work downtown at the original office. And he's like, you should just get up in the morning and walk to work.
Yeah.
I'll do that as soon as you do the same thing. But you're welcome to look at this. This is Big Bone Lick, which is past Cincinnati and over almost to the border of Indiana. And that's where she escaped from. And they did return Gretel to her family in Pennsylvania. Apparently, that community in where she was at had been raided and she was taken from there. Mm-hmm. They had no contact after that to know what became of one another. But once they got Gretel back to Draper's Meadow, they were able to figure out that she needed, you know, where she was from, and they found and got her back to what remaining family she had. Yes.
There is a state park in Virginia, near Marion, Virginia, called Hungry Mother State Park. Is this a memorial? Is that a memorialization of this?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now we've actually stayed there.
Yeah.
Well, now I want to go there.
Beautiful.
What I was discussing before is I was traveling right after doing the outdoor drama with this one year. And I come out of a roadside rest and I just remember I was standing there and I looked up at the mountains, and I love the mountains more than anything. And suddenly it was like, wait a minute. These are the same mountains that she went through. And I'm thinking, okay, there's no interstate. There's no bridges. So she had to go up. Amen. There's no bridges, so she had to go down. And it's just, you know, all the undergrowth and the trees, and it was like, whoa.
Without shoes.
Without shoes, yes. I was gonna do this barefoot this morning. Shoes on right now. My moccasins that I normally wear have fallen apart. I gotta make me a new pair. So I don't have moccasins. I didn't have, they were so falling apart, they were uncomfortable. Otherwise I would have had, but I thought, I'll just go barefoot. Then I got up and I realized, no, I'm barefoot. So these are historic shoes, but they're not old enough at that time. So these are 1800 shoes, not 1700s.
How long did she live?
She lived to be 85. She died in 1815, February 1st, 1815. Yeah,
husband died at what?
yeah. And she died,
Her husband died in his 50s.
Yeah. Uh-huh,
Yeah,
yeah. Is there any questions from the people on the other side of the machine? That's right. That's the machine. Showing people pictures.
the other side of the screen.
Yeah, the other side of that.
That's the one.
I mean, if they want to ask questions, I want them to be included. But I just can't, this woman's story is so fascinating and I just, yeah.
So where is she? Oh, sorry.
She's in Radford.
Okay. Did you say you were in the outdoor?
I used to be in the outdoor drama up at Winfield many, many years ago.
Someone in Radford,
Oh, okay, yeah.
years and years and years.
I started out as a guide at the one at Winfield. I had a friend who's like, can you help her out? We need someone to learn something fast. And I'm like, what? I grew up on the story of Jenny Wiley, and I know that's relatively in the tri-state. So they tell me, go to the Hurricane Wave Park, meet these people, and you're going to audition for a part. I've never acted in my life. You want me to do what? So I got the role of a guide, and they gave me a notebook, and they said, learn part of the guide. Okay. So I did that. We met every Sunday afternoon at the farm where where we would do this up at Winfield. It was private property, and met every Sunday from June to September when we did this. So we had plenty of opportunity to practice. There was an Indian village up in there that you encountered, a cabin, just anything we could do to make it look like them. The school kids would come during the week. We couldn't take them up on the trail because there was some steep parts and we didn't want to lose kids in the woods. You know, they like to make art. So we'd set them on the side of the hill and do the program there. My tent happened to be the nearest one to where they were. And I looked over and the property owner and one of the other guys is standing there and they're pointing at me and they're talking about me. And it wasn't my turn to be the guide with the kids. At that point, the guide stands still and the characters come through and interact and then go on about their way to tell the kids the story. So here they come. And I'm thinking, this is gonna be good. I hate to bother you. Could you do Mary Ingalls? We haven't got her. Mary's not here yet. I'm the guy. Yeah, but you got a photographic memory and you know the whole story. It's like, look, even if you have to put that script in your pocket, please. I got pockets. These are what I'm wearing is just really great. And you didn't have pockets in your clothing, you had a hole so you put your hand in your pocket. So I'm well, all right. There's nobody else who can do this. You sure? I'm gonna mess this up. No, you're not. And from that point on, I was Mary Ingalls. From that point on, and it was like. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to say not just Mary Ingalls part, I'm going to say the guide part because that's what I'm used to. And so I did that, and it worked well, and then I became Mary Ingalls. We the first year in camp, Jim and Dark Rain come and visited. They stayed at a hotel, but they came out and visited. and hung out with us, and we got to talk to them, and so that was really cool. Her family is from Gay County, Ohio. They're still up there, and they came to the drama. At the time, I'm a guy. One of her cousins comes in the most stunning white leather I've ever seen. Fringe, beads, oh my gosh, stunning. Well, every time, and so they're like, you get them. Me, I'm the new guy, and you want me? Well, it's your turn, go. And it's mile and a quarter hike. Didn't notice the first couple stops, but by the third or fourth one, this cousin would look at everything and look at everybody, and then she'd cross her arms, turn around, and I noticed Sharon. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing that bad? Are we upset her because this story does not make the Shawnee look good? Just to be honest, I mean, you know, it was a tough life, and for both sides. And so we come around, and she meets the lady at the time who was playing Mary Ingalls, dear friend. And so then I would take him back to the top of the hill and say, okay, there's the village. You can go visit people and meet, you know, see demonstrations of different things, you know, blacksmithing and stuff that people had to do to live. So she was the last one left standing in front of me, and I'm like, man, she's gonna really yell at me. And instead she grabs me by the shoulders. And it was so funny. I'm just looking at her like, what have I done now? And she's like, thank you. Thank you. She said, I wanted to, you all are dressed so well. She said, but I wanted in my mind to picture it as it was then. So she said, I would look at your characters, and then I would turn around and shut my eyes so that I could envision. And she said, you made it real. And it was like, whoa. The next year, and I don't know how many of you all are familiar with Mary Rod Furby. She was a professor at the other university in the state, the one I went. If you mix the two colors, you get green. That's not that's want to be. Now Mary Rod Furby writes kids, and she's got a book called Shawnee Captain. Hers are written for younger people, maybe junior high, maybe just a little younger if they're really got a high IQ. Because she wanted to write books about women in history so that girls would know that, yeah, there was women here when the country was founded. And so the next year she came down, and she had a modern tent, so she pitched her tent around where you couldn't see it. And she camped with us, and she sat around campfire and talked to us. And she also wrote a book on Mad Ann Bailey, Indian Scout, which she lived in Gallipolis, and she also dates to the time period. And the collection of books that she has is great if you've got kids that are into history.
Yes, I bought this book for my daughter. She's in 8th grade. And she really loves books, and she picked up the Follow the River book. And she actually took the first 3 pages. I said, I think it's too much. And she's like, yeah, I think so. So I bought this for her. I mean, she's reading this now. Yeah. And this gives a really good background of the settlement of Great Virginia. Yeah. More than Follow the River. Yeah. And did I don't think they had an agreement with the Shawnees that, like, wasn't that just great? Really, like really off. Yeah. This was just a road named because when they started, they had an agreement that they had so much land and they would let the Native Americans hunt on it. Produce. But this was just a road fan that passed through the area. Yeah. And they hit that community. And yes.
I wanted to comment about that, because I think this is with us in this day and time, we're trying to balance a lot of this. I'm not going to get into cultural war issue, but I love what you just did. And I caught it, and I don't know if your characterization, But to try to paint a truer picture. That it isn't, I mean, because you kept referring, of course, that's what she would,
Yeah.
to the engines.
Engines, yeah.
But
That's how-
when you commented and said. That the chief.
It's Wildcat.
Did she make it?
Yeah.
Did she get back? That's, we can't, I don't think we should lose that.
No. He was
Make
that,
sure that we kind of comprehend deep in our hearts and souls.
he was that
Struggle
impressed.
between. Coming into
Yeah.
territory. Native Americans dealing, and like I say, rogue group
Yeah.
probably. But you know, you get what I'm
He
talking
was-
about.
he
I just,
was-
I wanna
Yeah.
just tell you, I think. In your reenactment,
Thank you.
that's critical.
He was that,
Catch that moment,
he was that impressed with her determination to get
which
back.
humanizes him.
Yes, yes.
You see,
and
as a,
now-
not just,
Do you know if they looked for her at all? If she left, did they care?
We have no records of that. I would like to know what became of Betty after she got home. Because Betty, her sister-in-law,
It's so angry for her, for taking away the
yeah,
Native Americans, but it was
Yeah.
survival.
yeah.
They didn't, she kept telling.
Mary didn't have a choice when they traded her to the old Frenchman. Betty was furious that she was being left without, left with these engines that she didn't know, and the two boys. And, but I would love to know if anyone at any time recorded any of Betty's words, because she lived in that village for 6 years. She didn't travel on, so she was in that village for 6 years. I would love to know, what her life, her day-to-day life was. And what gets me, and I understand why Mary was so upset when she got back. How come I've been gone 6 months and you all ain't done nothing? I'm sorry. I've done this and this to get back here. What y'all been doing? And a lot of times, there were reasons that the Indians took white people. They made them slaves. They traded them back to get ransom, and a lot of times they would refuse. They would refuse what you had to offer. And a lot of times they were trying to replace lost family members. And when they would do that, they would find someone, and normally it was a child. They would find a child about the same age, same gender, and they would give them all those things and give them that child's name. And they would raise that child as if it was the one they had lost. So there was a lot of reasons for that, but I would love to know. I mean, I hope they didn't just sit around, well, okay, I guess she might try to get back some. I hope they were trying.
Well, according to the book, they did go.
Yeah, but she did not know any of that. So you can imagine, hey, I've been out here doing all this, and where have you guys been? And I think in her heart, she really thought when she got home, Betty and the boys would have already been back.
Where was the village where Betty was?
Down around Portsmouth, yeah, Shawnee State,
Yeah,
that was a Shawnee settlement.
so it was on the river.
Yeah, yeah. No, here was the Shawnee town. This is where the Shawnees lived. This is where the 12 Frenchmen went. But this is where their village was, and that is why Shawnee State is named.
They not go any further?
No. This is where Betty went. That was as far as Betty went. Until she was ransomed. So she just went from here, which is approximately Portsmouth, still a long way. And stayed there, but I would love to know what her experience was. And I have not found any, I mean, I've talked to descendants, of Mary Ingalls that has come out to the drama. Unfortunately, we had one come, it was the last year we did it. He had a heart attack and died on the trail on us. And his wife insisted we all come to the funeral home in dress.
Oh.
And here's this monster picture of her, or what image that they had made. She took the picture of Mary Ingalls off the wall and had, he was that obsessed with the fact that that was his ancestor and he wanted that story told. But he had relatives come in from out of town and she couldn't come with him, so he brought them all over. That he was in St. Albans and in that area. And she said he couldn't have been happier when he died. He was on that trail. And actually part of where we were was where she had walked. So that was, yeah, when she crossed the Ohio River would have been between the Kanawha River and Wyandotte, and closer to the Wyandotte end than Kanawha.
You mentioned the horse.
Yeah.
They left it remains across.
Yeah.
And in the Follow the River book, the horse meets with a rather graphic violent death trying to cross the river. So is that also something that he used to enhance the? The horse lover.
And like, nothing between the horse, but the horse, that would be me, like, I ain't leaving the horse, we'll just set up camp here for now. But yeah, that
Didn't happen.
no,
Good.
not according to, like I said, Escape from Shawnee Captivity.
There's another book, Angels Along the River.
Yes.
I mean, retracing the escape route of Mary Draper Ingalls. Have you all seen that book?
Hmm.
I'll put it out in an email.
There are several books on it. There is also a movie. And we're not, it is the most inaccurate movie based on her life.
What's it called?
It's called Follow the River. And you know, she has a boy and a girl. All right, there's a problem because she had two sons. And at the end, Chief Wildcat brings the two kids back home to her. Now, I think Ellen Burstyn is from, she's from, okay. Eric Schwerig, who was in Last of the Mohicans that plays Lucas, I love him to death as an actor. I can't watch Follow the River because it is so inaccurate. I can't even watch it just to enjoy a movie because it is so inaccurate. But the books, if you can find the one Escape from Shawnee Captivity from her family, that's the one that really, those are her words to her son. That's
So
all.
her, that was you referenced her telling her, actually her telling her to her son.
Yeah, as an older woman. After he's learned to read or write. And like I said, there is no punctuation at all. It is. I didn't even think about it until after I started reading it. It's like, and you read a sentence and you don't know where to stop. Because automatically we see a period in a sentence. Next thing, no, this thing is just words. And more words. Yeah, it's not real big. Like I said, it's like that big of a book. And it's about a half an inch thick. And every now and then her family will reprint it. And so it's hard to find.
Have you had any ever interest in any kind of writings about her that give you a sense of her, of the kind of character building that she had, the essence of who she, why she would have that stamina? My vocation, I wondered about a faith experience. I just wondered if
she had to have faith. That's all I can.
what her concept of, I don't know the history about the women.
I know they were of Irish descent, so they were Catholic. So you can't tell me you're out in the middle of nowhere and not have faith. I couldn't, I know that would be what kept me going more than I'm going to get home.
Yeah. You're-
So I don't know, but I just know that they were Irish and they came from Ireland. And so I'm going with this. In most instances, people of Irish descent are Catholic. But I cannot fathom if you didn't have that sense of, God's looking out for me. How in the world could you put your arms around a log in the middle of the night and get in a river knowing you can't swim and try to get across? I couldn't do it. The thought, I looked at the high river one day and I thought, there ain't no way. Now, the difference, I told you Jenny Wiley didn't go far. When Jenny Wiley was taken, they brought her straight up, what would be 23. The river was flooded so badly, the Cherokee couldn't get across. That is the only thing that saved her from going farther north. So they ended up, she stayed in a cave less than just a few miles from where the settlement was, not knowing where she was. But they couldn't get across the river because that story would have probably had a very different ending had she been able to cross that river. But yeah. Nobody in space has any questions out there?
It's not a big-
Cyberspace, yes. Well, it's been good coming to see you. I love sharing this story. I mean, if this story does not inspire you to keep going, I don't know what will.
Thank you, John and Mary Jo, for being here. We can mingle around a little bit and look at this map. I know this area of Bradford. I have family that lived in Devon for years. And when I reread the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, I kind of knew it was Virginia, but I didn't really put it together. I'm just amazed. I'm amazed at what she said she can get me a bigger version. Yeah, I'll never.
I had been coming up in Office Depot and praying, this hangs on my wall in my living room.
This is the.
And the people at Office Depot thought I was crazy. I told them, I said, I need my picture blown up so I can see it.
So how long have you been doing Sabrina? I didn't catch how long you've been doing.
25 years since finished Indian War, 30 years total in Civil War.
Wow, wow. Well, it's a fascinating book. It really is.
It is.
Wow.
And like I said, I read Mary Lodge Irving's book just because it's interesting. I know it's written on a kid's level, but there's a lot of stuff that she picked up that Jim didn't pick up. And then, so to me, that's fascinating from her perspective. And unfortunately, she passed in 2004. She wrote. So if you want further reading on this lady, there are other books out there.
When I researched the book a little bit, I came across something that said that Greta, that they weren't sure if she was a true character, but you're saying she was. Absolutely. That's okay.
According to Escape from Shawnee Captivity, yes.
Okay, all right.
And like I said, that's what I base my information on because those are her words.
Okay.
She does not mention a daughter at any point, being pregnant, having a daughter on the trail. That is not in there. Gretel is in there, and that's how we know Gretel's name. We don't know her last name, and I do not know where in Pennsylvania they took her back to, but it does make sense because most people say Pennsylvania Dutch. It's Deutsch for the German Deutsch. Yeah.
Right.
And so that does make sense that that's where she was from.
Even though she was kind of unhinged at times, it seems to me it helped Mary keep her sanity.
Yeah.
Because there were a couple of days that she wasn't across the river from her.
Right.
She missed her, but she did miss her enough to walk with her.
Can you imagine you're out in the middle of nowhere and the person with you is so mad and hungry they're threatening to kill you and eat you? That inspired her to get across that river. That fear out away, the fear of getting in the water to get across because, yeah. But I mean, I don't know Gretel's background, but if you're out and you've walked and you've walked and you walked and you're cold and you're hungry and you haven't had real food in months or weeks, your mind plays tricks on you. I know there is one point in which Mary Ingalls is climbing up the side of a mountain and she's holding on to, she's used the vines and the trees to pull herself up. And she has hallucinations and they think it was because of some of the plants she was probably on. Because she was trying, eating roots. Well, she got a hold of the wrong thing and she was passed out on top of a mountain having hallucinations. Yeah,
And then in the book, they got really, really sick for a couple of days
Yeah.
from something they had eaten that they shouldn't. I mean,
yeah, yeah. If she didn't have an ulcer when she got home, yeah,
and it took a while to nurse her back to health. I mean, she
Yeah.
was on death's door.
at 22, 23 years old, she had turned completely white-headed and was nothing but a skeleton.
Did she lose her teeth?
She lost some on the trail, didn't she?
Yeah. Can't imagine losing teeth and not going to the dentist, There's so many things that we take for granted. And you stop and think she's out of, you can't tell me she didn't get hurt at some time, all that underbrush, she's getting scratched by briars and limbs and, no medicine. She just on her own, basically. And I have, if anyone has questions in the future, Elizabeth has my contact information. And I also have business cards if you.
So any other questions before we wrap up the actual presentation?
Thank you
Well,
all
thank
so
you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this.
We look forward to this and it just, it inspired us to read. I think we all enjoy reading, but I reread the book and as I share with you, I picked up things that I didn't pick up the first time.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating book. And thank you for what you're doing, keeping your memory alive. Thank you so much.